The year is 476 AD. A barbarian general, a man named Odoacer, stands at the gates of Rome. He is not a stranger storming the walls. He is a product of the empire itself, a military leader who has risen through its ranks. He walks into the heart of a civilization that had dominated the known world for 1,000 years, not to burn it, but to claim it. Inside the imperial palace, he confronts the last emperor of the West, a boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus. There is no epic battle, no heroic last stand. The deposition is a quiet, almost bureaucratic affair. The teenage emperor, a powerless puppet on a gilded throne, is simply dismissed. Odoacer then gathers the symbols of imperial power, the diadem, the purple robes, the scepter, and sends them not to a successor in the west, but eastward to the other Roman emperor in Constantinople. The message is clear. The Western Roman Empire is no more. This is the date every schoolchild learns. The neat, tidy, and dramatic end of Rome. The moment a mighty empire finally fell. But this popular history is a comforting lie. It gives us a single, simple cause for a complex and terrifying collapse. The truth is far more disturbing. Rome wasn't murdered on that day in 476. The empire had already committed suicide, slowly and methodically, through a series of catastrophic decisions made decades earlier. The fatal decision was one of outsourcing. Faced with overstretched borders and a dwindling supply of loyal Roman soldiers, the late empire began to hire the very barbarians it once fought. They were called foederati. Entire tribes were settled within Roman lands, given autonomy, and paid handsomely to defend the frontiers. In essence, Rome outsourced its own survival. It paid foreign armies to protect a state whose citizens were no longer willing or able to do so themselves. This wasn't just a military strategy, it was a political abdication. Power, authority, and the monopoly on violence, the very definition of a state, were being sold to the lowest bidder. At first, it seemed to work. The borders held. But the foederati's loyalty was always to their paymaster, not to the abstract idea of Rome. As the empire's treasury buckled under the immense cost and its currency was debased to worthlessness, the payments became erratic. The hired protectors soon realized they held all the cards. Why serve an insolvent empire when you could simply take it for yourself? Odoacer was not an invader. He was a disgruntled employee demanding his final paycheck. His march on Rome was the ultimate hostile takeover. Now look closely at the world today. A powerful continent-spanning union forged in the aftermath of war, promising peace and prosperity, the European Union. Like late Rome, it is a complex bureaucracy governing a diverse and increasingly fragmented populace. Like late Rome, it faces immense economic strain, resorting to unprecedented levels of quantitative easing, a modern form of currency debasement, to paper over deep structural cracks. And most critically, like late Rome, it has begun to outsource its core functions. Its security is fundamentally underwritten not by a unified European army, but by the external military power of NATO, an alliance whose primary guarantor is not a member of the Union. Its economic stability is dependent on the whims of global markets and the fiscal discipline of member states who increasingly prioritize national interests over collective ones. The parallels are not just vague historical echoes. The EU is following the Roman playbook with breathtaking precision. The same reliance on external powers, the same hollowing out of internal identity, the same fatal belief that prosperity can be maintained without the will to defend it. The question is no longer when a modern Odoacer will arrive, but what form he will take, and how soon. Rome's fatal mistake wasn't military. It was handing real power to barbarian generals while pretending the emperor still ruled. The army became German, the administration became German, the emperor became a puppet. Today, the EU does exactly the same. Real military power sits with American-led NATO. Economic power sits with the unelected European Central Bank. Political power increasingly sits with national leaders who openly reject Brussels. Orban in Hungary, Meloni in Italy, AfD in Germany, Wilders in the Netherlands. Rome's late legions were 70 or 90% barbarian mercenaries who fought for pay, not Rome. When the gold stopped flowing, they switched sides. Europe has almost no independent army. It outsourced defense to the United States the same way Rome outsourced it to the Goths. If America ever pulls the plug, Trump, isolationism, whatever, Europe is defenseless. Rome's final century was one endless financial crisis. Taxes couldn't keep up, provinces stopped sending revenue, emperors debased the currency until it was worthless. The EU has printed over $9 trillion since 2008. Italy's debt is 150% of GDP and rising. Greece, Spain, Portugal, walking dead. Northern Europe is tired of paying. A state is more than its laws, its borders, or its economy. It is a shared story, a collective belief in a common identity. When that belief falters, the foundations begin to crack. For the Roman Empire, this process was a slow, creeping decay of the very idea of what it meant to be Roman. By 476, almost no one in Western Europe identified as Roman anymore. The title had lost its power, its prestige, its meaning. It no longer guaranteed protection, prosperity, or a place in a grand, enduring civilization. Instead, people clung to newer, more immediate identities that offered tangible security and a sense of belonging. They identified as Goths, Franks, Vandals, tribal loyalties that had supplanted the imperial one. The abstract concept of being Roman was no match for the concrete reality of a local warlord's protection and a shared Germanic tongue. The grand imperial project had become a hollow shell, its people no longer seeing themselves in its reflection. Today, a similar, deeply unsettling fragmentation is underway across the European Union. The post-war dream of a unified continent, bound by shared values and a common destiny, is facing its own crisis of faith. Polls now consistently show fewer than 50% of young Europeans feel European first. The number has been in steady decline for over a decade, accelerated by successive crises that have pitted member states against one another. They feel Italian, Hungarian, Polish or Irish first. The supranational identity forged in Brussels feels distant, bureaucratic and disconnected from their daily lives and national cultures. This isn't merely a matter of sentiment, it has profound political consequences. The 2010s Eurozone crisis resurrected ugly national stereotypes, casting Germans as unforgiving creditors and Greeks as irresponsible debtors, shattering the myth of fiscal solidarity. The 2015 migrant crisis drew new, sharp lines in the sand over sovereignty and cultural preservation, with Eastern European nations openly defying EU mandates. And then came Brexit, the ultimate rejection of the European project. A major world power democratically chose to sever ties, arguing that its national identity was incompatible with the ever-closer union. These are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a deeper identity collapse. The shared story that held Rome together for half a millennium is evaporating in the EU after just 70 years. The promise of a united future is being replaced by the pull of a sovereign past. And beneath the political fractures, a deeper cultural and demographic shift is occurring. In cities from Paris to Berlin, new communities with identities rooted far beyond Europe's borders are growing, while the continent's traditional wellspring of identity, Christianity, recedes. Its cathedrals stand magnificent but increasingly empty, monuments to a faith that once united a continent but now struggles to fill its pews. This creates a vacuum. When a unifying identity dies, it is not replaced by nothing. It is replaced by everything else. The question for Europe is whether these new competing identities can coexist within the old framework, or if, like in Rome, they will ultimately redefine the map entirely. To understand the end, we must first understand the nature of the ending. History provides the most chillingly accurate blueprint. In the year 476, the Germanic chieftain Odoacer, commander of the remaining Roman forces in Italy, faced a hollowed-out empire. He didn't storm the capital in a blaze of destructive glory. There was no final cataclysmic battle for Rome itself. The city had been sacked decades before. The real power had long since leached away from the emperor's palace. Odoacer's move was far more subtle and far more profound. He simply deposed the boy emperor, Romulus Augustulus, and informed the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople that the job of Western Roman Emperor was now obsolete. An administrative redundancy. He kept the Senate, the roads, the laws, the administration, the entire practical framework of Roman life. He just removed the fiction of a supreme central authority that no longer held any real power. It was a quiet, almost bureaucratic death. That is the precise parallel for what is coming for the European Union. The final act will not be a dramatic exit, a Brexit times 10. The Article 50 process is a trap, a years-long negotiation designed to punish the departing member. No, the modern Odoacer will be smarter. One day, a national leader, perhaps a familiar face like Hungary's Orbán or France's Le Pen, or perhaps a successor we haven't even heard of yet, will not ask for permission to leave. They will simply declare that the supremacy of Brussels authority is no longer recognised. And like Odoacer, they will aim to keep the most valuable parts: the euro, the single market, the Schengen zone for frictionless trade and travel. But the European Union, as a sovereign political project, the dream of an ever closer union, will be finished in that instant. Not with a bang, but with a quiet declaration that the emperor has no clothes. We can already see the rehearsals for this moment. Consider the first plausible scenario, the constitutional coup. This is already in motion. For years, the Polish and German constitutional courts have challenged the absolute primacy of the European Court of Justice. They have argued that in certain fundamental areas, the national constitution remains the supreme law of the land. The Odoacer moment here would be a national court ruling that a major EU treaty provision, perhaps concerning fiscal rules or migration policy, is incompatible with the nation's constitution and therefore void within its borders. The national government, citing the court's decision, would then simply refuse to implement the EU directive. It's a legal checkmate. Brussels can sanction, it can fine, but it cannot send in troops to enforce its legal supremacy. The state remains within the EU, but it has surgically removed the Union's authority over a critical policy area, creating a fatal precedent for others to follow. A second, more confrontational path is the budgetary blockade. The EU's power is fiscal. Its multi-year budgets and recovery funds are the glue that holds the bloc together, transferring vast sums from richer to poorer states. But these require unanimous consent. Imagine a scenario where a group of ideologically aligned states, say the Visegrad Group, forms a blocking minority. They don't argue over decimal points. They veto the entire 7-year budget until their demands on sovereignty, migration, or social policy are met. This isn't a negotiation, it's a hostage situation. The EU machine would grind to a halt, agricultural subsidies would stop, cohesion funds would dry up, the multi-billion euro recovery plan would evaporate. The ensuing crisis would pit member state against member state, forcing a fundamental renegotiation of the entire project, not from a position of unity, but from one of paralysis and blackmail. The Union would either fracture or be refounded as a much looser, powerless confederation. And what of the markets? The reaction would be instantaneous and brutal. In any of these scenarios, the bond yields of the rebel nation would skyrocket as investors demand a higher premium for the political risk. The euro itself would become volatile, its stability questioned. This creates an impossible dilemma for the European Central Bank. Does it intervene to buy the rebel nation's bonds, effectively financing the rebellion against the EU's own authority? Or does it stand aside and allow the market to punish the dissenter, risking a catastrophic default that could trigger a financial contagion across the entire Eurozone, just as the Greek crisis did a decade ago? The ECB would be trapped, forced to choose between political or financial collapse. This is the crucial point. Odoacer's declaration in 476 didn't cause the fall of Rome. It was merely the official recognition that it had already fallen. The power was already gone. Likewise, a future European leader repudiating Brussels' authority won't be the cause of the EU's demise, but the symptom. It will be the logical endpoint of years of hollowing out, of monetary stress, of identity fragmentation, and of outsourcing sovereignty until the central authority becomes a fiction. The act itself will be simple. A press conference, a legal filing, a refusal to comply. But its effect will be to knock over the first domino, revealing that the entire structure was already balanced on a knife's edge. The institutions in Brussels will continue to exist, the bureaucrats will still draw their salaries, and the flags will still fly. But the political entity, the supranational dream, will be finished. It will be a ghost empire, haunting a continent that has quietly decided to move on. Rome didn't fall because it lost a war. It fell because it stopped believing in itself, outsourced its power, destroyed its currency, and let its identity evaporate. The European Union is walking the exact same path, only faster. 476 AD isn't a date, it's a warning. Subscribe to Swords and Borders if you want to see the next chapter before it's written in fire. History doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it hands you the script in advance.